Welcome to Inspired Word. Stay inspired, stay motivated.
May you not desire success much more than to please God. May you not desire it. Because these days, the demarcation is no longer clear. Pastors boasting about buildings. Building. You talk, okay, let's listen to. He's talking about a building. Now, go to the New Testament, you'll discover that there was no building project. Now, the question is, was it an omission? The fact that you could build something is not an indication of the fact that there's revival. Meanwhile, we need buildings because we need to be delivered from the elements. But the fact that we were able to secure a building is not a proof that God's kingdom has been established. Because a building is a tool. Just like your computer is a tool. You have a computer, does that mean you have finished work? You just have a tool that will help you do what you are employed to do. This building is a tool. A tool cannot be an end. A tool is a means. So we cannot start boasting about buildings. In fact, if you are boasting about buildings, it means you have lost sight of the goal. That's why you are in transit and you are boasting. It's very easy for you to veer off, and it is predicated on wrong appetites, and that's why we need to test our hearts again and again to see if we are still in line. Especially when we begin to become prominent, we start becoming financially buoyant, and you can do so many things without having to pray. You are on a slippery ground. Yes, because you can fight God conveniently. You have ability, you have resources. As you grow in God, as you grow and God gives you the grace to enter into levels of influence, make sure that you go back to God and inquire to find out what that influence was supposed to be wielded to achieve, so that at every point in time you are within the scope of the will of God. Now, do you still remember the prayer in the book of Matthew chapter 6 verse 9? It said, thy own will, not my will, but thine own will be done on earth. How is it supposed to be done? In the same fashion as it is found in heaven, without modifications. Just in the same fashion as it is found in heaven. That is the extent to which we are supposed to create prayer opportunities for the will of God to be established in the same fashion upon the face of the earth. Now, so God already has a will, and that will has been fully implemented in the heavenlies. Part of what prayer does is to create opportunities for God to be able to have that measure of authority upon the face of the earth to implement his will on earth as it is already implemented in the heavens. It means that in the heavenlies, God can manifest his authority to the fullest extent. Are you there? Anytime we talk about will, we must also talk about authority. Because the reason why the will of God is done in heaven is because God has authority. He can manifest his authority to the fullest extent, and that's why his will is done in heaven. So even though you gave your life to Christ, if God cannot exercise his authority over your life, unfortunately, he cannot manifest his will through your life. The extent to which you yield, somebody saying, oh, I want to be a praying warrior, I want to work miracles, I want to do signs and wonders. It's possible. But you see, the possibility of realizing that dream is dependent on how much you yield. So we see Lucifer making known his intention. And this his intention is contrary to the will of God. And the act of exercising your will apart from the will of God, the act of exercising your will contrary to the will of God, the act of exercising your will against the will of God is iniquity. The will of God is known, but you are exercising your will against the will of God. The prophetic story that Isaiah told in the book of Isaiah about the fall of Lucifer is tied to a situation where someone exercises his will against the will of God. So the Bible says, how art thou falling? How is it that you could fall? Oh, Lucifer. Lucifer means light bearer. How come is it possible for the light bearer to fall? How that this weaken the nations? Because he has expressed his glory in so many colors of brilliance that it is unheard of to think that this bright star could fall. So there was an inquiry into how he fell. And he fell because He exercised his will against the will of God. It is not only Lucifer that fell by this trap. I've seen preachers that were humble and God began to commit things to them, and suddenly they now began to gain some form of influence. So they started becoming loose, and they accepted principles that were not really Christ principles. Some antichrist technology, some antichrist principles, and it was working for some time. And then they became victims of those principles that they subscribed to, because every principle is connected to a principality. And that's why we must be sure that the principles that you are running with are principles that are righteous. If they are not righteous, you are doing business, you are trading with principal spirits that such principles mirror their civilization. And after a while, these principalities will make demands on you. And when they do, you see, you are profiting from unrighteousness. You are profiting from strategies that sustain textures that are anti-kingdom. But it seems to be bringing results. And this generation is a generation of results. And that's why we eventually get to accept the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because it can produce results. Meanwhile, there is no life of God in those results that are produced. It will come to a time where the principles will overwhelm the entire system, and the principality will begin to make demands. At such a time, you cannot escape. Because if you escape, it means that the system you have built is going to suffer loss. And no one wants to be seen as a failure. So in order for him to keep that ship of success in the eyes of men, he will be in a situation where he will use his will apart from the will of God. The moment that has happened, then the thing that happened to Lucifer that we're investigating, his fall, will become what will result. These guys, they served God at some point, but through principles. And these principles that they adopted was drawn from appetites that were not submitted to God. And those appetites became the platform of a new civilization in deviation from God's expectation. See, the extent to which God can move and continue to move in your life is the degree to which you are submitted to his will. That thing called the will of God is a big matter. Don't stray away from it. The way to judge your compliance in kingdom things is the will of God that your life is administering. If your life wanders away from that crucible, you become an enemy of God without knowing it. You become an enemy of God and you are yet speaking in tongues. Lucifer was the light bearer, but he fell because his will was occasioned against what? The will of God. May you not desire success much more than to please God.
Welcome to Inspired Word. Stay inspired, stay motivated.